Morning, Sam.
Morning.
Thanks for joining me. Wanted to chat a little bit today about appreciation versus inflation and what they have in common, how they're used interchangeably, and what the differences are. So just grab Sam without much warning. Figured we'd make a video and have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
And so what would you think that if you had to put a definition on, how would you define the two, or what would the differences be?
I would say appreciation is whenever an asset of some sort is growing in value, and broad brush terms, inflation is generally deflating a value of an asset. Like the dollar is inflating and it causes a devaluation of that.
Okay.
asset.
I was thinking about this a little bit earlier before I snagged you, so I had a little bit more time to think about it.
Mhm.
I don't know what the economic dictionary's definition would be, but what I was thinking in my mind is that appreciation is when the value of an asset goes up,
Right.
where inflation would be that the price goes up.
Right.
And a lot of times those look the same, but kind of as an example to clarify the difference,
Yeah.
if a dozen eggs is a victim of inflation, the price changes, the price goes up, but the intrinsic value of those eggs is the same. It'll still make only so many omelets or feed so many people.
Right.
And you could say the same thing about a bigger asset like a house. Say, well, with appreciation
Mhm.
or inflation, the value has gone up, but the intrinsic value has kind of stayed the same also, because it can only house one family in whatever neighborhood it was in, just like it could when the price was less.
Right. The utility is pretty much the same.
Right, the utility or intrinsic value is the same,
Right.
maybe slightly less because now it's slightly older. But I think what the difference is, maybe is that in a lot of those assets that we would say, this house has appreciated,
Right.
is that it's not a disposable item like the eggs that you're going to use once and that's done.
Mhm.
When you're done living in the house, you can sell it and recoup that money, hopefully that you paid for it, and hopefully that it is appreciated or inflated over time.
Right.
I think something else that's relevant there is, you had mentioned earlier, the value of the dollar is what affects inflation, because if the value of the dollar goes down, everything has gotten more expensive because you need more dollars to buy that thing.
Right.
So with inflation, a lot of things, almost everything moves up at once. So it looks like stocks move up and houses go up and gold goes up, but so do eggs and textiles. Everything's
Right.
gone up because really it's the dollar that's gone down.
Right.
Where if a particular asset appreciates, it might be appreciating at a different level because of other factors, like a collectible that appreciates, like a piece of art. Its intrinsic value, as far as an aesthetically pleasing thing to look at, hasn't changed,
Right.
but its value as a collectible has, and it can appreciate more. Or if your house is in a better location that's become more desirable, now it's worth more maybe than the effect that just the value of the dollar's had on it.
Right. And at the core of both of those is inflation and appreciation is the inextricable link to economic pressures like supply and demand.
Right.
Whenever demand is high and supply is low, you tend to get appreciation in an asset. Whereas if you have an oversupply of currency, that means that the value of that currency goes down for the same asset in
Right.
relation to the demand of that item.
And currency is like the common link to everything, because everything has a
Right.
value in dollars. We know how much a dozen eggs cost. We know how much a house costs. Obviously, every house is different, whatever. But
Mhm.
everything can be valued back to a dollar. You wouldn't say, well, my house is worth so many hundreds of thousands of eggs.
Right.
But
You could. Barter system.
Yeah, but that's the point of a currency, is to have something that everybody understands the value of. So
Right.
if the currency goes down, the price of everything goes up, even if the value doesn't. So the price goes up because of the supply and demand of the currency in that.
It's just a convenient medium of exchange.
Yeah, but there's other factors with supply and demand, other than how many dollars there are. Like I was talking earlier with Dominique about eggs. She has chickens and didn't realize that you can't get a bunch of eggs at Walmart for the last month or two. Apparently there's still some at Costco or whatever, but we keep trying to we buy the eggs by the 60 and you can't get them. So the value is going, or the price is going up because of supply and demand more than just the effect that the dollar has on that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And so as it relates to real estate in our world, a peeve of mine is that people will tell me that mobile homes don't appreciate. And you would have probably heard for most of your life that vehicles don't appreciate. But then during COVID, you could buy a brand new vehicle and you could sell it 6 months later for more. So kind of it appreciated, but kind of it was from the devalue of the dollar.
Yeah.
And the supply and demand, because when they kept people from work, they weren't producing enough cars to meet the demand, so the value kept going up.
Right.
And so it may be true in some sense that like mobile homes don't necessarily appreciate, but they do go up in value compared to the dollar very strongly in almost every market. And I say almost every market because the currency that we use covers the whole country and has a huge effect on the economy of the world.
Right.
And so when people say, "Oh, well, mobile homes don't appreciate," I'm like, "Well, that mobile home was only $2,000 when it was brand new before I was born, and now it's $50,000, and it's not in as good a shape as it was 40, 50 years ago."
Right.
So tell me exactly, Dave Ramsey, why you think that hasn't appreciated when it's worth 25 times what it cost when it was brand new.
Right. 'Cause demand exceeded supply. If they produced a whole bunch of mobile homes, more than the demand, and you inflated the number of mobile homes on the market, that would decrease the value of the mobile homes, and it would no longer be appreciating like it is. But since demand is outpacing supply, the equilibrium point of those two market pressures creates the appreciation.
Yeah, the supply and demand for them not producing enough, which not to get in, this video isn't really about mobile homes, but to use that as the example, mobile homes haven't been as popular as they once were because most local governments have made it very, very difficult to open new mobile home parks. So people can still buy them and put them on private land, but the barrier to entry financially, economically makes that difficult. So it's not like in the 60s and 70s where people were putting parks all over the country, and so people were buying these. Nowadays, it's they aren't coming into the market as much because they don't have as many places that they can be placed.
Right.
But beside the supply and demand that was artificially affected by local governments all over, it's the federal government's flooding the market with the dollar over and over and over.
Right.
I feel like maybe I'm getting a little old. My son just turned 18, and I was talking to him about what I could buy with $1 when I was his age versus when I was a kid versus what my parents told me that they could buy for a nickel when they were a kid. And I'm like, they keep printing money. The value of a soda, the intrinsic value of a soda stayed the same. The recipe stayed the same for the most part. Yeah. My dad could buy a Coke, back in the day, a Coke, a donut, or a piece of candy for 5 cents. He's not, ancient. 5 cents would get you anything, and now all those things vary from 50 cents if you get a great deal to like $2 for a soda a lot of places, or more if you buy it at a restaurant and stuff. But it's just silly how much everything costs because they just keep using inflation as a hidden tax. Inflation is a tax on everybody that buys things. If they wanted to come along and say we want 10% income tax from everybody this year, 10% more than you paid last year, the public would go very upset.
Right.
And so instead of doing that, they just print 10% more money and literally steal 10% of our purchasing power.
Right.
It's absolutely crazy.
Right. Even if you just stored cash in your mattress, it still can no longer buy what it once was. And that's just a sneaky form of that tax.
Yeah, if my dad put a nickel away when he was a kid to buy a soda later, now, he can't buy anything with that nickel. It's literally worthless. Yeah. And so to recap on the whole subject, inflation is caused in general by the government printing more money. So inflation is when the price goes up because it's relation to the dollar.
Right.
And appreciation is when something goes up driven more by supply and demand, or maybe it's just more valued in the market,
Right.
which is supply and demand. If something is more valuable today because it's a collectible, or because there's more people living in that area, so the house is worth more because of the supply and demand type of thing, rather than, inflation is, everything got more expensive, most generally tied to the money
Right.
supply.
Right. They're both good or bad depending on your position too.
And depending on what asset you're tying it to, inflation is pretty much always bad for consumable goods. Nobody buys a dozen eggs and is planning on reselling them.
Yeah.
But if you're buying houses and you're using leverage responsibly, so when 2020 hit and the houses were going up like crazy, I had bought a number of homes that I own as rental properties, and they just went up and up and up. If I'd have bought them for cash, I bought a $200,000 house for cash, and then later it's worth $300,000.
Yeah.
I didn't really make anything, because I had one unit and I still have one unit, and if I sold it, the money I got later for $300 would only buy me one unit again. I wouldn't be able to sell it and buy more with it. But with the leverage, I could.
Right.
So say I owned a house, and I, just as an example, say it was $200,000, and I borrowed 100% of it, which normally isn't a good idea, but for the example, I borrowed the entire thing, and then it goes up by 100,000. Now I've got 1/3 of that house for free. So if I did that 3 times, I could sell all 3 of them and buy one house for free, profit, free and clear.
Right.
And that was just numbers to be used as an example. But
Yeah.
I did have quite a few homes at the time that were leveraged, not 100%, but I
Yeah.
had money on them. So my return on my investment that I had put in was really good. I wish I had bought everything I could from 2015 to 2020. I
Yeah.
mean, of course, hindsight, you never know when we're going to be in those hyperinflation periods.
Right.
Hopefully, we are not going to have that same hyperinflation, even though it was good. It was good for me in particular. It wasn't good for the economy.
Yeah.
It wasn't good for the country. It was just good for people who had assets that were
Right.
leveraged, but wasn't good for a lot of things.
Right. Right. Yeah. Fixed rate debt is the best hedge against inflation.
Yeah.
Like you're borrowing at 3% and inflation's 6, 7
It's all-
plus percent.
It's almost like you're short selling in inflation.
Right,
It's,
right.
it's like, I'm gonna call a short on that because you don't trust the government, which
Right.
in the long run will almost always work out. But of course, there's the dangers that if you get over leveraged, you can end up, losing assets, and
Right.
like a domino effect, and one goes bad, you end up losing
Right,
several.
right.
So this video isn't advocating for over leveraging. It's just showing the
Yeah.
levers and the tools and things that go into forming how our economy works. So.
Right, right. And inflation is only half the component there too. Like, inflation is, on a long term, a 2% a year inflation target is the Federal Reserve's goal. And that's still far, like, as bad as inflation was, it's still far better than deflation, historically speaking. Deflation is basically where nobody has money to buy anything, and so then now supply and demand is in the opposite direction, and that's because people lose their jobs and can no longer afford what they once could, and that's far worse.
I think the Fed's idea of aiming for 2% inflation is a slight hedge on not deflating, which is a whole nother can of worms. So reality, what I think that they should have as their target is 0, because 2% inflation means that they're stealing 2% of the wealth of all privately held cash in America every year.
Right.
And they haven't hit that low of an inflation number for a while, so they're stealing more than that. But stealing 2% of our wealth every year is not a good trick. That's not moral. And if they would stay, in my opinion, if they would keep out of it altogether, then they shouldn't have a target of what they're aiming for inflation. The target should be let the free market work significantly less restricted than them playing with the money supply. And we're going like way off topic, but having a goal of stealing 2% of Americans' money on top of the taxes and whatever that they're taking in from all their other sources, and income taxes and sales tax, which of course isn't federal, but tariffs and all the different ways that the different levels of government take money. They're like, on top of all that, we just want to take an extra 2% right off the top. So, and it's just like, we're looking out for you. We're going to make sure that we don't do our job so badly that we really screw things up, and we're going to do that by just stealing an extra 2% from you.
Yeah, I think in terms of capital markets that you do need some inflation for the Keynesian economics that this country runs on, but I think it should be in relation to what you're taxed on. Because you're right, it is taxation. And so I think if they're gonna increase inflation, they should also decrease the direct taxation.
Yeah, and the biggest problem is that people, the vast majority of Americans, don't see inflation as a tax, and that is
Yeah.
100% a hidden tax.
Mhm.
Every economist knows it. Like, this is a tax on anybody using the greenback dollar. It's
Right.
it's nuts. But anyways, way off topic. Hopefully you learned something a little bit about hopefully we helped wrap your mind a little bit more around inflation and appreciation and how they work together, and some of the things that the pros and cons of using debt and stuff like that. So hope you enjoyed it. Please like and follow, and we'll see you next time. If you guys have any real estate needs whatsoever, please reach out. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, share, follow, comment, and you can find me on any of these other places that you enjoy your content. So thanks very much. Really appreciate it.